New rules for COVID testing in India set up by the centre. No tests needed at hospital discharge now, and healthy people don't need RT-PCR tests for interstate travel. Enough is enough, says the Delhi High Court on oxygen emergency. High Court tells the centre give Delhi supply or face contempt. Now Army Hospital also runs out of oxygen inside Delhi's oxygen crisis. We'll bring you a special report. COVID-19 now in India's villages as well. In Uttar Pradesh, people are dying, no tests, so no COVID proof. India's vaccinations now dropped by 27% on an average 19 lakh versus 26 lakh on the 30th of April. In Mumbai, drive-in vaccination for the elderly. Bribes or beds in Bengaluru? Well, that's the question being raised now. BJP MP alleges scam involving officials. Political violence in Bengal mars Mamta victory. Prime Minister calls the governor. BJP president is in West Bengal. Mamta meets the top officials, blames the BJP. Hello and welcome. You're watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Let's start with some news just coming in about some new rules and recommendations which have been sent in by the centre, and this is regarding COVID testing. Now, in that, the centre says that no test is needed at hospital during the discharge of a patient. Also adding that if positive, RT-PCR must not be repeated at all. Symptomatic patients to avoid non-essential travel altogether, and healthy people don't need RT-PCR tests for interstate travel. Also adding that changes amid pressure on labs are being made because of falling on testing numbers. Remember, everybody has experienced this right now. It's getting really difficult to get more and more RT-PCR testing done in the country, and some of these rules being put out by the centre in order to ensure that it goes off smoothly here on. There is pressure on labs. There is also growing pressure on the oxygen crisis in the country. This is what's happening inside Delhi's hospitals.
Inside this hospital in Kalkaji in Delhi are 10 babies, some as premature as 25 weeks, and the oxygen is running out.
Another SOS from a hospital for oxygen. The Triton Children's Hospital is left with just 2 hours.
We flashed the hospital SOS this morning that only 2 hours was left and the supplier was nowhere in sight.
We've just got a contact for a police official who said he's willing to help. So lots of times it's these kind of calls that actually help people get oxygen. The system has broken down so much that it is people helping in a personal capacity which actually gets people oxygen. So I'm going to call him now and hopefully things work out with him.
My name is Astra.
Ji.
Just to introduce myself, I am an IPS officer.
Okay.
I just saw your name, that needs some NDTV particularly.
Right, okay.
So I would send at least 3 or 4 cylinders, big size.
3 or 4, okay.
Big size, that is the jumbo size cylinder.
Okay.
10 moments later, the cylinders sent by the police official arrive, but it will last only hours. Delhi's smaller hospitals more and more have asked families to find oxygen, leading to a rush like at this government refilling centre in Mayapuri, this in West Delhi. Dilip, whose uncle is in the Gandhi hospital with oxygen saturation dropping below 75, has been here since yesterday afternoon.
2 दिन पहले ऑक्सीजन की वजह से मेरी दादी एक्सपायर हो गई है, मेरे चाची को कोरोना है, मेरे चाचा हॉस्पिटल में एडमिट है। उसके बाद की हालात है, अभी देखो नया दूसरा हॉस्पिटल से लिखवा के देखो, अगर पढ़ सकते हो तो अरेंज ऑक्सीजन फॉर गांधी हॉस्पिटल, देखो आप अगर दिखा सकते हो तो कैमरे से क्लियर करके दिखाइए, लिखा है और अभी डेट टाइम लगा के स्टैंप लगवाया है।
These two brothers have managed to get a cylinder for their father in a hospital in Ghaziabad after arguing with officials. They say they have been given completely contradictory orders.
यहाँ शॉर्टेज हो रही हॉस्पिटल में, वो हमारे को बोल रहे कि आप लेकर आओ। हम यहाँ आते हैं, ये डिनाई करते हैं, हम आपको नहीं देंगे, हॉस्पिटल वालों से लो।
With Meher Pandey and camera person Manoj Thakur, Revati Hariharan for NDTV.
In fact, taking cognizance of that, the Delhi High Court has now told the centre, why shouldn't we charge you with contempt of court? Brought to our notice that Delhi is not getting sufficient oxygen. Supreme Court had asked centre to ensure supply of sufficient oxygen as well. The centre had said that a compliance affidavit is being filed before the Supreme Court. That was to happen on Wednesday. We fail to understand what the affidavit will do when the necessary oxygen is not being brought to Delhi. Not even a day's allocated oxygen has been distributed. Some tough words there going in from the Delhi High Court to the centre.
Right now we are with Raghav Chadda, who is managing oxygen for hospitals in Delhi, and today he has issued a oxygen bulletin. Raghav, what is the situation when it comes to oxygen in Delhi?
Look, the total demand of oxygen in Delhi stands at 976 metric tons of liquid oxygen. Against 976, which is our demand before the central government, we are receiving on an average close to 430 metric tons of oxygen. Yesterday, to be precise, we got 433 metric tons of oxygen. That is, the demand is 976, we are getting 433. That is roughly 44% of our demand. The way the Arvind Kejriwal government has been managing the oxygen situation with reduced supplies is with better oxygen management. We are managing oxygen distribution in a way that even with reduced supplies, we are able to man the fort. We are able to sustain the existing infrastructure.
Central government is saying that we have increased your quota. They have increased your quota, and but the problem is transportation. That is the one part of it. Another part of it, in Delhi High Court also, High Court said and pulled up central government to provide you the required oxygen. What is update on that?
No, you are absolutely right. First of all, as far as quota is concerned, yes, our quota has been revised from 390 metric ton. It was revised to 490. From 490, it was revised again to 590 metric ton. But unfortunately, this upward revision in the quota is only theoretical. The number two, logistics, as you said, transportation of liquid oxygen. Now, the Honorable High Court also recognized this fact and said in so many words that Delhi is not an industry state. Delhi does not have cryogenic tankers plying on the streets of Delhi. We do not have a steel plant in Delhi. We don't have an oxygen producing facility in Delhi.
Thank you, Raghav, talking to us. That was Raghav saying that Delhi is getting just 44% of its total demand. In Delhi, with Sanjay Kaushik, Saurabh Shukla for NDTV.
In fact, the oxygen crisis is not just limited to Delhi. It's happening across the country. In Bengaluru especially, now more and more hospitals sending out oxygen SOS. Hospitals are there running out of oxygen as well. This as an appeal came in for a BP MP sourcing oxygen. Here's a report to take you through the details.
Hospitals in Bengaluru have been sending out appeals for oxygen and even asking patients who have been admitted to find a hospital bed elsewhere, all because they are running out of life-giving oxygen. On Monday, at least 3 hospitals indicated, including in letters to patients or addressed to whomsoever it might concern, that they were short of oxygen. 2 deaths at Arka Hospital in Yelahanka were reported to be due to oxygen running out. Officials said they were still waiting for a report on the deaths. The Deputy Chief Minister says meeting the oxygen demand is a huge challenge, but seems to put some onus on the hospitals.
Many of the hospitals, they have not created capacity for the storage of oxygen. The storage tanks have not been built properly and they are dependent on cylinders. And those cylinders which they have with them, that itself also is not sufficient enough to cater their requirement. Yes. So many are running short of cylinders, as well as beyond their capacity they have been admitting people.
The demand for oxygen is up over 8-fold.
I think it has scaled up by 8.5 times. Even then we are able to procure and supply every day to all the hospital managements and the hospitals. We are trying our best and it has been addressed very effectively.
Not all would agree. Social media is flooded with appeals from people asking for ICU beds and oxygen.
Almost a little more than 70-75% of the overall hospital beds being outside the ICU, which were hardly requiring oxygen supplementation previously, but now more than 90% of patients being COVID patients, and of which almost 80-90% of them requiring significant amount of oxygen supplementation, and that is what is making the difference of oxygen consumption.
The City Corporation, the BBMP, has appealed for help with procuring oxygen concentrators, oxygen cylinders and NIV ventilators. The opposition Congress chief says the oxygen shortage deaths are murder. Bengaluru and Karnataka, like so many places across India, desperately needing as much oxygen as they can get in this overwhelming second wave. Maya Sharma for NDTV.
In fact, staying with news from Bengaluru, the South Bengaluru MP over there, Tejasvi Surya, has alleged that there is a scam involving the BBMP officials to allot scarce beds in the hospitals following payment of bribes. Now, in a press meet, the BJP MP said that the BBMP, that's Municipal Corporation over there, booking site says all beds are full. But so many are getting discharged, so many patients are dying, but the BBMP site says all the beds are booked. There is a nexus of BBMP officials and Arogya Mitra people in the hospital and outside agents as well. A strong allegation there coming in by Tejasvi Surya. Remember, Karnataka, a place where BJP is in power, and Surya said that the beds were allotted by the BBMP to patients in home isolation who were not even aware that they've been given such a bed. When they did not get admitted within 12 hours, the bed was auto-unblocked. He said, adding that this has happened in thousands of cases as well. So very serious allegation there coming in from a BJP MP in Bengaluru. But let's talk about Maharashtra now, where Maharashtra, one of the worst affected states with around 6.6 lakh active cases. But Mumbai reported about 2,500 cases in the last 24 hours, 62 deaths as well, and recorded a dip from 75 over there. Good news, a bit of it at the moment. Maharashtra stands at about 51,880 cases. 900 COVID deaths have been reported overall, and the fatality rate at the moment stands at 1.49%. More and more stories coming in from rural India, where even tests are scarce and these numbers a lot of times go unreported. In Uttar Pradesh's Bulandshahr, at least 18 people died in a fortnight just in one village during the Panchayat elections. They had COVID-like symptoms, but no COVID tests were done to establish if the virus was indeed the killer. A large number of migrants returned home to vote, and that seems to have increased the spread of the virus as well. Now, the government has initiated COVID testing on mission mode in the villages, but is that a little too late?
At Parwana village, 18 kilometers of Bulandshahr, public announcements calling people to undergo COVID tests. NDTV visited the home of Nazakat Saifi, who used to work as a carpenter in Faridabad but had returned home after the last lockdown. He recently took ill, was shifted to 2 hospitals but died on April 22nd.
ट्रीटमेंट प्रॉपर नहीं मिला था, इसलिए हार्ट की जो प्रॉब्लम हुई है, हार्ट अटैक हुआ. कभी भी उसको हार्ट की प्रॉब्लम नहीं थी, ना बीपी हाई था कभी भी उसका. नॉर्मल सिचुएशन, बाइक पे गया ट्रीटमेंट लेने के लिए, ना कि कोई एम्बुलेंस में.
The last rites of Buro Devi was being performed in the same village. It is suspected she too died of COVID. Villagers say at least 18 others have died due to the spread of coronavirus during the Panchayat elections. 16-year-old Sumit was taken to 2 hospitals, but he didn't return alive.
तुरंत औरंगाबाद लेके गए. औरंगाबाद ले जाने के बाद में उसको एक ड्रिप लगाई. ड्रिप के बाद में उसके एक दर्द हुआ अचानक. दर्द में उस डॉक्टर ने इंजेक्शन लगाया, लेकिन उससे कोई रिलीफ नहीं मिली. फिर हम दूसरे हॉस्पिटल में ले गए, वहाँ भी उसने ड्रिप लगाई, इंजेक्शन लगाया, वहाँ भी कोई रिलीफ नहीं मिली. फिर हम और बुलंदशहर ले जा रहे थे, रास्ते में चरौरा जाके उसने दम तोड़ा.
A health department team is at the village temple to appeal to the residents to get themselves tested.
हर एक व्यक्ति का चेकअप करेंगी, जो भी किसी को भी कोई दिक्कत है उसके लिए वहीं पर दवाई का वितरण भी किया जाएगा और इनकी कोरोना से संबंधित जांच भी की जाएगी। अगर मृत्यु का और भी कारण के, क्योंकि मृत्यु का कारण वहाँ से कोरोना पेशेंट निकले नहीं है ज़्यादा, तो उनकी भी जांच की जाएगी, कुछ और कारण तो नहीं है।
In Gularia village of Barabanki district, 10 migrant labourers whose trip back home was sponsored by the Pradhan candidate so they could vote in the Panchayat elections, all of them took ill. A few had to be hospitalized. From campaign to voting and counting, COVID protocols were largely forgotten during the Panchayat elections. Add to that an influx of migrant workers who returned home to vote.
पिछली बार गांव में उतना कहर नहीं देख रहे थे हम लोग कोरोना का, पर इस बार गांव के पेशेंट ज़्यादा हैं, तो इस बार हमें गांव में एहतियात करने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है। इस बार गांव के पेशेंट बढ़े हैं पिछले साल के कंपैरिजन में कोरोना के।
A rural COVID surge that has been masked by low testing. With Kamal Khan and Uma Sudhir, Usama Shah for NDTV.
Moving on, and India's unemployment rate rose to a 4-month high of nearly 8% in April, and the outlook remains weak, with state administrations now extending the lockdown to curb the record number of cases. Unemployment increased to 7.97% from 6.5% in March. More than 72 lakh jobs lost last month, according to the data from Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy Private Limited and a private research firm over there. Let's talk about vaccinations now. India's daily vaccination showing a not so impressive downward trend. The vaccination crisis only deepening as the average daily doses fall about 27%. On an average, 19 lakh today versus 26 lakh on the 30th of April. Look at the difference really over there in the vaccination. Why is that happening? Well, if you look at social media, talk to people, when more and more people want to get vaccinated but simply not getting access to them at the moment. Now, the West Bengal has reported several instances of post-poll violence in the states where elections have been historically violent. Mamata Banerjee too met with officials today. Let's give you a wrap on what happened.
BJP President JP Nadda, along with senior BJP leaders, meeting people who have come here, people who have been actually affected by post-poll violence.
Sharnulata Adhikari has lost her 40-year-old husband Haran Adhikari on Sunday, the day of the election results. She says he was dragged out of his home at Pratapnagar in Sonarpur, about 60 kilometers from Kolkata, and beaten to death. Several other members of the family were also injured. Mr. Nadda will lead a dharna in protest in Kolkata tomorrow, the same day that Mamata Banerjee takes oath as Chief Minister of West Bengal for the third time.
और टीएमसी के गुंडे कार्यकर्ता वो हरन अधिकारी के घर में गए, बच्चों को धमकाया, उनके ऊपर अटैक किया और मिसेस हरन अधिकारी जो हरन अधिकारी की पत्नी थी उनके मुंह पर वार किया, उनका दांत तोड़ दिया और बाद में हरन अधिकारी को वहां से निकालकर घसीटते हुए पीटते हुए इस रास्ते से उसको ले गए और रास्ते में पीटते पीटते उनकी जान चली गई।
उन्हीं সন্ধ্যাবেলা উনি গাছ কাটে তাল গাছ, উনি যখন কেটে আসছিল তখনই ওরা মারবার জন্য চেষ্টা করেছিল, বোম ফেলছিল পায়ে পায়ে। তা উনি যে বাড়ি এসেছে আর অতটা বলিনি, রাস্তায় ওরকম করতেই পারে, ওরা জিতেছে বলে টিএমসির লোক। এবারে আমার বলেছে ভাত দিতে, আমি ভাত দিয়েছি, উনি খেয়ে শুয়ে পড়েছে।
Mr. Nadda had repeatedly attacked Mamata Banerjee on law and order, and he did so again today. Leaders of the Congress and the left too have sounded an alarm and condemned the Trinamool for the violence. The Trinamool has lost workers too, at least 3 in East Bardhaman district alone, at Jamalpur and Raina. With the Prime Minister making a call to the Governor on the situation and the Ministry of Home Affairs seeking a report from the state, the issue may snowball further. Mamata Banerjee, the Chief Minister, has dismissed the BJP claims as false and has warned the party against trying to provoke communal violence in Bengal after losing the elections.
हम तो रैली नहीं किया है। आप देखो इतना जीत का बाद में भी बीजेपी इतना एट्रोसिटीज किया, सीएपीएफ इतना एट्रोसिटीज किया, इलेक्शन कमीशन इतने एट्रोसिटीज किया, उसका बाद भी मैंने बोला सब शांत रहो.
A day ahead of her swearing in, Mamata Banerjee held a meeting with top officials of the state on the issue. The Trinamool Congress says once she takes charge, there will be transfers of officials to ensure law and order prevails in the state. In Kolkata with camera person G.D. Shankar and Monitipa Banerjee, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
The latest on IPL now, which has been postponed indefinitely. Rika joins us for the very latest. Rika.
Thank you very much, Sonal. The news coming at this hour is that the CSK batting coach Mike Hussey has tested positive for COVID-19. And why has the COVID bio bubble breach happened? Let us look at the reasons behind the breach of this biosecurity bubble. Firstly, the hospital vendors, testing labs were not managed properly the way they were managed in the UAE. There was air travel involved, and which later became the biggest risk factor. As many as 3 people contracted COVID during their travel from one city to the other. Let's have a look at what happened next. Why was this breach? There was a demand for tarmac access by the teams, which was denied by the state governments. Also, the tracking device that was worn by the IPL players was not as good as the last time around. Questions are being raised over testing of people outside the bio bubble who were all indispensable to staging of the tournament. Food delivery was allowed until the last week, which also left many questions unanswered as to why people from outside were coming and delivering food. Each franchise was allowed to create its own bubble. So there was a standard operating procedure laid out by the BCCI, but not everyone followed that to the T. Now, IPL Governing Council and the franchises had earlier proposed to move the tournament to UAE, but the BCCI top brass was determined to have the tournament in the country, and it ended with the breach of the bio bubble.